Hello and welcome to another episode of the CTM Survival Guide. As always, Rock here, and today we are going to do a bit of a continuation from last time with the tools and weapons, discussing some of the things that we either missed or just didn't talk about last time. So, the first major question that arose from last episode was, where do hoes fit in the equation of tools and their damages versus weapons? Well, it's actually quite simple. You would kind of assume that possibly the hoe would be a tier down from the shovel, so you'd be, sword, axe, pickaxe, shovel, and then hoe. Well, that's actually not the case. The hoe actually does the same amount of damage as your hand, a wooden and golden shovel, and a wooden and golden shovel, regardless of the quality of the hoe. So a diamond hoe is going to do the same damage as a wooden hoe. Something good to know. So if you ever are in a situation where you have almost every other tool other than a hoe, you will want to use that instead. The exception of this, of course, is being enchantments, but vanilla item-wise, the hoe is probably the worst tool to use as a weapon. Now, some other things to mention that are also useful to know is that using a tool as a weapon incurs a double durability loss versus using it as its correct purpose. So using a diamond axe, for example, as a weapon to substitute your iron sword will incur a double durability loss on the axe versus using the axe as a axe for logs, wood, and such. So keep in mind with that, although it is good for a pinch, it's not necessarily best to use as a main weapon unless there's stuff such as high levels of unbreaking on it. That's another thing useful. Now there is an exception to this rule, which is of course the hoe. Although the hoe is the worst tool to use as a weapon, it does not lose any durability if used as a weapon. So in standpoints, it's an invincible, or it's pretty much an unbreaking weapon. You can't break it by using it as a weapon. So getting a high enchanted hoe can be pretty efficient given the stats. Now, speaking of stats, one thing that was brought up and asked about was the enchanted items versus weapons. Now, we all know that a weapon or a non-weapon item, such as a hoe, or a non-weapon, non-tool item, such as a battle sign or a stick or battle wool, for all who cares, all do a base damage of 1. Just because they're not intended as a weapon, they're going to do the minimum amount of damage. Now, once we start applying enchantments onto them, this is when things get a little interesting and we start doing more damage. So what we're going to be covering, as we can see these signs right here, is Sharpness and how Sharpness works with as an enchant in general. Now, Sharpness will apply a random bonus to the base amount of damage of the weapon based on the quality of the Sharpness. Sharpness 1 will add a random amount of damage between 1 and 2, whereas Sharpness 4 will add a random amount of damage between 1 and 11. So if we take our Sharpness 4 sign here and we start beating these skeletons, we should see a pattern of our sign doing between 2 and 12 damage for Sharpness 4. So 3, 2, 2, 7, 7, 12. Okay. So you can see, it's a lot better than a non-enchanted item, non-weapon item, but we still have that factor of randomization. So if we take into example a hoe, say whatever quality hoe that has Sharpness 5 on it, the Sharpness 5 hoe will be doing between 2 and 14 damage randomly. That's one thing I don't really necessarily like about the random system with Sharpness, is that you don't get a consistency. It's very, as I stated, random. So your Sharpness 5 item can do a lot of damage, or it can do no damage very frequently and inconsistently. So, yeah, 14 damage. Now, one thing that I would like to point out with this is that although some battle sign or a hoe and the such with Sharpness 5 may seem good, it only does between 2 and 14 damage. Whereas if we have something like a iron sword with Sharpness 3, an iron sword at base is going to be doing 6 base damage plus 1 to 8. So a iron sword with Sharpness 3 will be doing between 7 and 14 damage, meaning it does the same amount of damage, base damage, the very minimum. It does the same amount of minimum damage as a diamond sword, and has the same cap as a Sharpness 5 battle sign, for example. So if you get into a situation where you can get iron plus that has Sharpness 3 plus, always go for the weapon versus the battle item. So with that, we give a little bit more information on tools versus weapons with enchantments and durability and all of that. So as always, if you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or feedback, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section down below. And also leave any questions regarding topics that you would be interested in learning more about down in the comment section down below as well. As always, this is Rock, and I'll catch you guys in the next episode of the CTM Survival Guide. Later.